Most people never notice how much they give away just by being always available. We answer every call, say yes to every favor, help anyone who asks, and show up whenever someone needs us. At first, it looks like kindness or being a good friend. But after a while, it just feels exhausting. You lose track of your own time, your own needs, even your own personality. It's like you're living for everyone else, but not for yourself. Carl Jung saw this problem clearly. He knew that people are afraid to say no because deep down, they don't want to be left out or disliked. That's why so many people make themselves too accessible. They think, if I'm always there, people will value me. But it doesn't work like that. If you're always there, people just start taking you for granted. You become invisible in a different way because they never think about what you want and need. Have you ever felt drained after spending time with certain people? Like you're always giving, but rarely getting anything back? That's the cost of always being available. You lose energy, you lose motivation, and sometimes you even lose respect for yourself. Jung would say, the more you try to please everyone, the less anyone truly sees you for who you are. Your real value gets lost. The biggest change happens when you finally decide to stop being available all the time. Maybe you start saying no to things you don't want to do. Maybe you turn off your phone and take a day for yourself. Maybe you finally admit that you need rest, not another responsibility. It feels weird at first, maybe even scary. You worry that people will get upset or think you're selfish. But this is exactly what needs to happen. When you set boundaries, some people will test you. They might call you less, complain, or say you've changed. The truth is you have changed. You've stopped putting everyone else first and started thinking about your own life. Some people won't like it, but the people who really care about you will understand. And over time, you'll notice that the quality of your relationships starts to change. The people who only wanted you for your help will fade away. The ones who respect you will stay and maybe even appreciate you more. Jung believed that learning to say no is one of the most important steps toward becoming your true self. It's not about being rude or shutting people out. It's about understanding that your time, your energy, and your attention matter. You don't have to be at everyone's service 24/7. When you pull back, you start to see what's really important to you, and you get the chance to do things that actually make you happy. Of course, the first steps are the hardest. You'll feel guilty for putting yourself first, especially if you're used to always being the helper. But think about this. If you're burned out and unhappy, how much can you really give to others anyway? Saying no sometimes doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a real person with limits and needs just like everyone else. So, what really changes when you stop being available? You get your time back. You start to feel more energized and more in control of your life. You realize you can choose how you spend your day and who you spend it with. And people around you start noticing the difference, even if they don't say it out loud. You look more confident. You sound more sure of yourself. You stop feeling like life is just happening to you and start feeling like you're the one in charge. If you're worried that people will leave if you set boundaries, remember this. The ones who only liked you because you were always available weren't real friends anyway. The ones who really care will understand and maybe even respect you more for standing up for yourself. The truth is, you can't be everything to everyone. You need space for yourself, to rest, to grow, and to figure out who you really are. When you finally stop being available all the time, you open the door to a better, more balanced life. And you realize something powerful. It's not your job to always say yes. It's your job to live your own life on your own terms. When you first start pulling back and stop making yourself available to everyone, something strange happens. You notice who really values you and who only wants you when it's easy. Some people will start to disappear from your life. Maybe it's a friend who always called when she needed to talk about her problems, but never asked how you were doing. Maybe it's family who only reached out when they wanted something, not to check on you. Suddenly, those connections feel less important. You see them for what they are, one-sided. At first, this can feel lonely. You might wonder if you're pushing everyone away or if you're doing something wrong. But the truth is, this is just the start of finding out who really belongs in your life. When you're always available, it's hard to see who appreciates you and who just takes advantage. But when you step back and give less, the ones who stick around are usually the ones who truly care. This might mean having a smaller circle, but it will be a stronger one, full of real relationships, not just obligations. There's another thing that happens when you stop being available. You start hearing your own thoughts for the first time in a long while. If you've spent years running from one commitment to the next, always making space for other people's plans and problems, you might not even know what you really want anymore. You might not remember what makes you happy, what you care about, or what dreams you used to have before life got so busy. Jung talked a lot about this. He said that the true self can only emerge in quiet, in space, in solitude. When you stop filling every minute with other people's needs, you start noticing your own. Maybe you pick up an old hobby. Maybe you realize you love reading or music or walking in nature. Maybe you finally think about what you want to do next year, not just next week. This is where real change starts. The more time you spend with yourself, the more you realize that your worth isn't measured by how many people you please or how many things you do for others. For some, this new freedom can feel a bit scary. You might be so used to being the reliable one or the fixer that you don't know who you are without that role. But the truth is, those roles were never your whole identity. They were just habits built over years of putting others first. Now, you have a chance to choose your own story. Who do you want to be if you're not just someone else's support system? What do you want your days to look like? These are big questions, and they deserve honest answers. You'll also notice your energy coming back. Before, you might have felt tired all the time, emotionally, physically, even spiritually. But as you start saying no and taking time for yourself, you get a little more energy with every day. It's not selfish to rest. It's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup, and the more you refill your own, the more you actually have to give to the people who matter most. Difference now is you give by choice, not out of guilt or fear. Another unexpected thing happens. People start respecting you more. The first reaction to your new boundaries might be confusion or even frustration, but over time, people start to get it. They notice that you don't say yes to everything, but when you do, you mean it. Your time and attention become more valuable, not less. You become known as someone who values themselves. That's powerful. People can sense when you're acting from a place of self-respect, and many will respond with respect in return. Of course, some won't. Some people will call you selfish, changed, or difficult. Let them. Often, these are the same people who never had your best interests at heart. Jung would say that when you finally show your true self, some people will leave, and that's a gift. Every goodbye makes room for someone new, or even just more room for yourself. As your life changes, you might face some tough choices. Maybe you have to step back from certain friendships. Maybe you start spending less time with family members who don't treat you well. Maybe you even walk away from a job or a relationship that only ever took and never gave. These are hard decisions, but with everyone, you get a little bit stronger. You realize that your happiness isn't tied to anyone else's approval. You'll also see the world differently. Before, you might have thought that being busy and helping everyone was a sign of importance. But now, you see that real value comes from what you choose, not what you allow. Your life starts to fill with things that make sense to you, not just what's expected. Maybe you volunteer because you want to, not because you feel you have to. Maybe you show up for a friend's big event, but say no to every random favor that comes your way. You learn to choose, and that choice is where freedom begins. Jung taught that individuation, The process of becoming who you really are only starts when you listen to your own voice. That voice was drowned out by noise for a long time, but now it's becoming clear. You're not just a helper, a giver, or a fixer. You're a person with your own dreams, limits, and life. When you stop being available all the time, you start building a life that's truly yours. It's not always easy, and sometimes it gets lonely. But the peace you find, the energy you get back, and the respect you earn from yourself and others makes it all worth it. You start to understand. You matter, your time matters, and your life is yours to live. As you keep choosing yourself and your own boundaries, something inside you shifts for good. At first, it might feel strange or even wrong to say no to people, especially if you've spent most of your life trying to make everyone happy. But with every small act of putting yourself first, you get a little stronger and more confident. You begin to see that your life isn't falling apart. On the contrary, it's finally coming together in a way that feels real. People who once called you the reliable one might complain or even fade away, but as the dust settles, you realize you don't actually miss them. What you miss is the idea of being needed, the sense of purpose you got from always being the one who could fix everything. But slowly, you discover a deeper purpose, building a life that actually works for you. You notice that you have more energy, more patience, and more real joy. When you do give your time, it's because you genuinely want to, not because you feel trapped by obligation or guilt. This is where the real magic happens. You start to attract new people and new experiences that match this new, healthier version of you. Instead of relationships based on convenience or routine, you begin to experience connections that are honest and mutual. You become drawn to people who also value their own boundaries, who know how to say no and respect when you do the same. The old pattern of giving until you're empty starts to break. In its place, you find relationships built on respect, not on neediness. Jung would call this individuation in action. He believed that every time we set a boundary, we claim a new piece of ourselves. You become less dependent on external validation, and you learn to trust your own inner voice. You stop seeking approval from people who never really cared, and you stop wasting time trying to convince others of your worth. The only approval you need now is your own. Something else begins to happen. Your mood improves. It's hard to be happy when you're always running on empty. But as you protect your energy, you have more room for positive emotions. You laugh more, you worry less. You even start to enjoy being alone. Solitude stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like freedom. You use that time to think, to rest, to plan, to dream. And out of that quiet, your next steps become clear. Not because someone else told you what to do, but because you finally know what you want. There will still be challenges. Sometimes old habits pop up, especially when someone you care about puts on pressure or tries to guilt you back into your old ways. Maybe you slip and say yes when you mean no. That's okay. What matters is that you catch it and adjust. You're learning a new way to live, and that takes practice. Every day is a new chance to draw your boundaries a little firmer and protect the life you're building. Some people will try to test your limits. They'll call it odd hours, expect you to drop everything, or act hurt when you put yourself first. That's not a sign that you're wrong. It's a sign that your boundaries are working. You don't have to argue, defend yourself, or explain your reasons to everyone. You can simply say, "I can't do that right now," or "I need some time for myself." The people who get it will stay. The people who don't, let them go. You're not responsible for everyone's happiness, and you never were. One of the best parts about setting limits is what you discover about yourself. You find out what you actually enjoy when no one is making demands on your time. Maybe you realize you're creative, or you love learning, or you need quiet more than you thought. Maybe you want to travel, or start a new project, or reconnect with people who really matter. When you're no longer booked solid with other people's requests, you can finally start saying yes to your own life. You'll also find your self-esteem growing. Before, your sense of worth might have been tied to how useful you were to others. Now, you value yourself for who you are, not just for what you can do. You respect your time, your limits, your dreams, and others start to do the same. Your confidence shows up in your posture, your voice, and even the way you walk into a room. You no longer chase approval. You bring it with you. Jung would say this is the real journey of becoming whole. You're not just a collection of habits or reactions anymore. You're a person with your own story, your own choices, and your own path. When you look back, you see how far you've come. From the days when you said yes out of fear to now, when you say yes out of love for yourself. You may still have moments of doubt. That's normal. But now you have the tools to check in with yourself and ask, is this really right for me? And if the answer is no, you know you have the strength to honor that. You stop living on autopilot and start making decisions with intention. Life feels lighter, clearer, and more honest. The world around you might not change overnight, but you do. And as you grow into this new version of yourself, you start to realize this simple truth. You were never put here to be everyone's safety net. You're here to live your own life and to do it well. When you stop being available to everyone else, you finally become available to yourself. When you keep holding your boundaries and choosing yourself, you start to notice just how much lighter your life feels. The constant pressure, the worry about pleasing everyone, the stress of running from one demand to the next, it starts to fade. You finally have space to breathe. And with that space comes a new kind of clarity. You see which relationships are strong enough to handle the real you, and which ones depended on you always being available and agreeable. You might be surprised at how some people respond to the new, more self-respecting version of you. Some will push back. They'll try to guilt you, remind you of all the times you helped, or even accuse you of being cold. But every time you stay firm, you teach people how to treat you. Over time, most of them adjust. They realize that if they want you in their life, they have to respect your time, your needs, and your limits. Others will quietly fade away. It stings at first, but then you realize those relationships were never as deep as you thought. They were built on convenience, not true connection. In their place, you start to notice new people coming into your life. People who understand boundaries because they have their own. These are the friendships and partnerships that last because they're based on respect, not on how much you can give or sacrifice. You might also start seeing new opportunities. With less of your energy spent on endless obligations, you have more time for things that matter to you. Maybe it's your work, your creativity, or your health. Maybe it's a hobby you always wanted to try. Maybe it's just spending a quiet afternoon with someone you love, really being present instead of worrying about what else you should be doing. When your mind isn't filled with everyone else's problems, you can finally hear your own voice again. Jung would say this is where individuation really becomes powerful. When you stop blending into the background of other people's lives, you step into the foreground of your own. You might notice that you have more ideas, more motivation, even more hope. Things you once thought were impossible now feel worth trying. The courage to say no to others becomes the courage to say yes to yourself. This isn't just a psychological shift, it's a physical one too. Many people find that as they set better boundaries, their sleep improves, their stress goes down, and even their health gets better. That's because your body and mind are finally working together instead of fighting a constant battle between what you want and what others want from you. You feel less anxious, more grounded, and genuinely happier. Sometimes you might still feel guilty. Old habits don't disappear overnight. But each time you catch yourself slipping into yes when you mean no, remind yourself of how far you've come. You've learned that you can't control how others feel, but you can control how you respond. If someone is disappointed that you're not always available, that's their emotion to manage, not your responsibility. You'll also start noticing how much time you get back. Hours that used to disappear into other people's emergencies or constant social plans are now yours again. What you do with that time is up to you. Maybe you use it to rest, to grow, to work towards a dream, or to simply do nothing at all. That's the point. Your life finally feels like it belongs to you. There's also a deeper benefit that might surprise you. As you become less available to the world, you become more available to yourself. You start to understand your patterns, your triggers, and your real desires. You see where you used to give in out of fear or habit, and now you have the power to make new choices. You notice which situations drain you and which ones give you energy. Your intuition grows stronger. You trust yourself more. Jung believed that all real transformation begins with self-awareness. The more honest you are about what you need, the more you can create a life that fits. And with every step, your self-respect grows. You stop asking, what will people think if I say no? And start asking, what will happen to me if I always say yes? That question alone changes everything. Some people might try one last time to test your limits. Maybe they show up at your door unannounced or expect you to drop everything for them. This is when you see how strong you've become. You don't have to get angry or defensive. A simple, calm, I can't help right now is enough. You learn to trust that your needs matter, even if someone else is disappointed. At this point, your relationships feel different. You're no longer chasing approval or afraid of letting people down. You're building connections based on real respect, mutual, healthy, and free. You feel a sense of peace, knowing you're not sacrificing your happiness just to keep others comfortable. And even when it's hard, you know you're doing the right thing for yourself. The world doesn't end when you stop being available. In fact, it finally opens up. You see what's possible when you're not weighed down by everyone else's demands. You realize you're not selfish for taking care of yourself. You're simply awake. You're living your life, not just passing through it. That's when you finally understand. Everything truly does change when you stop being available to everyone else. The change starts small, but it grows. You feel it in your energy, your mood, your relationships, and your future. And once you've tasted this freedom, you'll never want to go back. As you reach this point in your journey, you start to realize just how much you've transformed. It's not just that you have more free time or less stress. It's that you see yourself differently. You no longer see your value through the eyes of others. You don't measure your worth by how much you do for everyone around you. Instead, you measure it by how true you're being to yourself. This is one of the most powerful shifts you can experience. At first, it's uncomfortable, almost like walking on new legs after years of crawling. You're so used to saying yes that saying no feels strange. You're so used to putting yourself last that putting yourself first can bring up all sorts of doubts and old guilt. But every day you make the choice to stand by your boundaries, those doubts lose their power. You build a new foundation, one that's solid and lasting. Now, when people try to push your boundaries, you don't flinch. You simply stand your ground. You've learned that true friends and loved ones will respect your choices, and those who don't were never really for you. This clarity saves you years of frustration. You stop wasting energy on people and situations that don't give anything back. You stop pouring your heart into empty cups. You also become more present. Before, your mind was always on someone else's needs or problems. Now, you find yourself noticing the world around you. You see beauty in small things. You listen to your own thoughts and feelings. You pay attention to what excites you and what calms you down. You reconnect with yourself in ways you forgot were possible. The more present you are, the more meaningful your experiences become. This new presence extends to your relationships. You can actually listen to people now instead of thinking about all the things you have to do. You can enjoy time with loved ones without worrying about the next demand waiting for you. You're not just physically present, you're emotionally there too. People notice the difference. They start treating you with more respect because you respect yourself. Jung would say that you've begun to live authentically. This is when you stop performing and start being. You don't say yes just to avoid conflict. You don't agree just to fit in. You're not afraid to stand out, to disappoint, or even walk away if something doesn't feel right. You've stopped betraying yourself for the comfort of others. You may find that some people try to make you feel guilty about this. They might call you changed or harder to reach. But inside, you know the truth. You haven't become selfish, you've just become whole. For the first time, your life belongs to you, not to other people's schedules, moods, or expectations. And with that comes a sense of freedom and peace that can't be shaken. One of the greatest gifts of setting boundaries is how much you learn about yourself. You realize which relationships are worth fighting for, and which ones it's time to let go. You see which activities actually make you happy, and which ones you only did to please others. You might even find the courage to pursue dreams you put off for years. Now, with more space and less noise, you can finally hear your own voice clearly. You also gain a new appreciation for solitude. Being alone is no longer scary or uncomfortable. It's an opportunity to rest, to recharge, and to reconnect. In that solitude, you discover new ideas, new strengths, and new possibilities. You stop needing constant validation from the outside world because you're learning to trust yourself from within. The more you practice this, the more natural it feels. Boundaries are no longer something you have to fight for. They're simply part of who you are. You don't apologize for protecting your time or saying no. You don't feel guilty for taking care of yourself. Instead, you see it as an act of self-respect, the foundation for everything else in your life. And the people who matter, the ones who really care, will support this new version of you. They'll understand that you're not pushing them away. You're simply making room for yourself. Your relationships become healthier, deeper, and more genuine. You experience more joy and less resentment. You give not because you have to, but because you truly want to. Looking back, you see the journey wasn't easy. You had to let go of old habits, face uncomfortable emotions, and risk losing people along the way. But you also gained something priceless: the freedom to live your own life on your own terms. You learned that being available to everyone was never the path to happiness. The real happiness comes from honoring your own needs, values, and dreams. Carl Jung believed that real growth is only possible when you become the author of your own story. When you stop living by someone else's script, you can finally write your own. And that story is always richer, deeper, and more satisfying than a life spent trying to meet endless expectations. So, as you move forward, remember, you don't owe anyone your constant presence. You owe yourself the chance to build a life that feels right. The world will adjust to the new you, and those who truly love you will be glad you finally chose yourself. Because everything changes when you stop being available to everyone else and start being truly available to yourself.